a main contributor to Google Maps maplets, and he also has experience in other aspects of Google Maps. Before joining Google, Ben got his PhD from Australia, Queensland University. Okay, with that, let's welcome Ben Appleton.
My name is Ben Appleton. I work on the Maps API, particularly for the Google Maps API. Today my topic is recent additions to the Maps API. In particular, I'll be talking about the Maps API for Flash. We launched the Maps API for Flash only a few weeks ago in California. The Maps API for Flash is something of a new branching out that we're considering. We're investigating for Maps APIs at Google. So, as you may well know, is that better? Okay, I'll have to lean a bit closer. So, we launched the JavaScript Maps API 3 years ago. It's been very, very successful. Today it has 150,000 different sites which use it, and we expect that to grow a lot in the coming years. So, since we had such a successful JavaScript API, we've been considering ways to reach new audiences and new groups of developers. And so the Flash Maps API was a natural step forward for us, a natural branch for us. So we launched the Flash API only a few weeks ago. I'll be talking about that today, and if there is time, I'll also talk about the Static Maps API, which we launched in February. For those of you who may be impatient, at the bottom of this slide, there's a link to the software development kit, the SDK, for the Flash Maps API. So you can go there immediately if you like, and you can download the SDK. It includes the documentation for the API, as well as the interface swig file. Now I'll explain what that is shortly. So to start, this is what the Maps API for Flash looks like. It is designed to be very similar to the Maps API for JavaScript that we launched already. However, it is more customizable because Flash has stronger graphics capabilities. Here is a very simple example map. You can, of course, drag it around. You can zoom in, you can move around. You can zoom in and zoom out. So it has many of the same capabilities as the JavaScript API. So the way that this API is structured is very interesting. It's novel for a Flash API. What we've done is we've explicitly separated the interfaces from the implementation. So when you're building your application which uses the Maps API for Flash, you compile your action script on the left there with the interfaces swig file. The interfaces swig file includes the specification for the API. So this is all of the classes and all of the methods which you need to draw a map and to put things on that map. It does not include the implementation library, which is loaded later. And this allows your application to remain small, so that it loads really quickly. So, we've explicitly separated the interfaces from the implementation. Cannot hear me? Oh, now you can hear me. Okay. Great. So, we've explicitly separated the interfaces from the implementation so that your application can load as fast as possible. And at Google, we care a lot about speed. We notice that whenever we speed up a product or an API, it gets many more users, and users are much happier. And so, if you're trying to make money out of an API site, and just trying to attract users to your site, this is very important. So this is an API for Flex. It uses the Flex software development kit. So you might want to be familiar with the Flex SDK, but we'll talk a little bit about how to use it. So the way the The previous slide described how you build a Swift. This is an application. This slide describes how it's deployed in the browser. So you build the Swift, which includes the interface Swift file. In this case, we're including version 1.1 of the Swift. And then when this gets loaded into the browser, it dynamically loads the implementation library from Google. Now, as Google releases new versions of the Maps API for Flash, each time we release a new version, your application will automatically start using that new version instead. And so this means that as we add performance optimizations to make the API faster, as we fix bugs, these are automatically updated in your application, and you don't need to recompile. So let's take a look at a very simple example of how to use this Maps API for Flash. So you write your application using ActionScript 3. Here we have a very small example of the ActionScript that you need to write to use the Maps API to simply show a map at a particular location. So we define it to be in the comp.google.maps.examples package. We import several packages that we need to use in our code. We import the maps package, particularly the map event, map type, and long classes. So these are the basic classes you need to show a map and to look at a particular place. Then to customize the Maps API for our site, we derive a derived class called Hello World from the map class. So this lets us extend the map and customize it as appropriate for our site. In the Hello World constructor, we call the super class, which is the map constructor, and we then add an event listener. This event listener waits until the implementation has loaded, and then we can interact with it. And so finally, in the function onMapReady, we set the center of the map to look at a particular viewport. So this is a very simple example. We built it using MXML, which is part of the Flex SDK. So in this case, it's a very simple packaging. We just include the examples package, particularly instantiating a Hello World object. We specify the width and the height we want our map to have. And we also present and provide an API key. This API key is the same API key that you would have used if you'd seen the JavaScript Maps API. These can be freely, you can get these for free. You just go to this URL. And finally, we have to call the MXML sync, the Flex compiler on our Hello World.mxml file. And this will generate our Swift. So this generates helloworld.swift. You'll see that it's reasonably small at 20 kilobytes. This is so that your API site can load very quickly. And then at runtime, as I mentioned before, we'll load the Maps API implementation, which is about 100 kilobytes. If you haven't used Flex before, if you haven't used ActionScript before, you might want to take a look at these two URLs at the bottom of the page. So let's take a look at that. This is a very simple example. So you can see that when the map loaded, we've zoomed in to New York. We'll see that this is indeed New York. Okay. So we'll make this example more complicated in the slides to come. First information, how to embed a Swift into your web page. So here we have a very simple web page, which includes just a div, which holds the map object. We use the object and the embed tags to embed that Swift into the web page. You may have recalled that earlier we specified in the MXML file the width and height of the map, as well as the key. You can also specify this in the HTML page if you want to. This will let you retarget your Swift to work on several different sites. So we've seen how to build a very simple example application using the Maps API for Flash. Now I'd like to take a closer look at the packages that are in the API. The first package of interest is the comp.google.maps package. This is the fundamental package that lets you draw a map. It includes the basic objects which you require to use the Maps API. For example, the map class lets you draw a map. The map type class lets you specify what type of map you should see. So this lets you specify if you want to see road maps or satellite images. There are also wrappers for the event system used by the API. A lat long, for example, is a point on the Earth's surface, and so on. The second package here is the overlays package. This comes with some overlays that we've written for you. You can also write your own. I'll get into that a little bit later. So this comes with the marker object. The marker object is just an icon which sits on top of the map. You can also render polylines and polygons, which are paths to regions. And there are other overlays as well, such as the ground overlay, which lets you render an image on top of the map. The third package is the controls package. This includes all of the UI widgets, which let you pan and zoom the map and gently navigate. So these include map type control, map control, position control, and so on. The fourth package is the services package. So far, the only service we have in the FlashMaps API is the client geocoder. This is an object which allows you to ask Google to geocode an address. So you provide a screen address, and Google will respond with the location of that address. And it's worth mentioning, although you don't often use these packages quite so much, the interfaces package defines basic classes which you can override to customize your map even more. So you can provide custom implementations of an overlay or a map type or the controls class to customize your site, customize the API to really look and feel like the rest of your site. So let's take a look at how to use these packages. So first, here we have the map package. We're simply extending the hello world example from before. You'll see the two bolded lines. There's this new code in OnMap Ready. Enables zooming using the scroll wheel and enables continuous zooming. So let's take a look at this. So here we have the hello world example from before. Now if I zoom, you'll see that rather than jumping, it's very smooth. And if you've used the JavaScript API, you may have noticed it's a little bit jerky as it zooms in and zooms out, whereas the Flash API is quite smooth. So now we have a look at how to add a marker to the map. This is very simple. We import the marker class from the overlays package. Then, when the map is ready, we create a new marker object and we add that marker overlay to the map. So here we take a look. So now we're in Paris. You can see that we've added a marker to the map. Very simple example there. Here we have extended the example to add each control class to the map. So we're adding map type control. I'll show you that. So here we're going to add a map type control, an open map control, and so on. This here is the map type control. Just like in the JavaScript API, you can select various map types. Here we have the terrain map type, which shows you the topography of the region. The satellite map type, which shows us satellite imagery. And of course, the classic road map type. In the bottom right of the page here, we have an open map control. This lets us see a wider region around this blue rectangle, which is the map that we can see on the page. And I can use this to navigate around very easily. So I can drag it to the new viewport I want to see, and it pans over. And then in the top left, we have the position control, which lets you pan around the top of the map, as well as the zoom control, which lets you zoom in and zoom out. Okay. So next we'd like to take a look at how to use the geocoding class. So we're going to geocode an address. This is the address of the Sydney office where I work. What we do is we first instantiate a client geocoder object. This is a proxy object which lets us make requests of Google and find out where an address is on the map. So we construct a client geocoder object. Second, we add an event listener to this object. So we wait for it to respond saying that it has geocoded an address. And then finally, we ask Google to geocode this address. This is an address in Sydney. So when we load this site, or make a request to Google and place a marker on top of the Sydney office. You can imagine that geocoding is very useful in an API site when you have a list of addresses and you want to find where the place is on top of it. So let's now let's now look a little bit closer at how markers work. So here we're going to make a marker which opens an info window when you click on it. We first include the info window options class, which lets us specify how an info window should be rendered. We then add an event listener for the event to click on the map, on the marker rather. So when the user clicks on the marker, we will open an info window at that location on the map. You can customize your markers further using the marker options class. So here, when we construct our marker, we specify a marker options class, which provides a fill style that is green, and then specifies the format for the label as well. In fact, there are many, many marker options. Here is a list of the most popular marker options. You can do things with markers, such as allowing them to be draggable, setting the style they're filled with. If they are dragged, how much should they bounce? Should they have a shadow? What icon should they use? And so on. And I'll let you read the reference to find out just what you can do with markers. And so that final package we mentioned before was the styles package. This provides us with many options for customizing how our site looks, how our map looks. So for each of the controls classes and the map class and the overlay classes, they all come with an options class, which allows you to set options for how this should be rendered for you. So here's an example map where we've added several types of overlays and we're customizing them to see what we can do with them. So you can see that here, for example, we have a custom polygon. It has a black outline, it has a blue interior, which is transparent. You can change the colours of polylines. You can specify what markers look like. This one fades from red to yellow. Another marker here. And so on. This here is a ground overlay. Someone has drawn a simple picture and specified the latitude and longitude extent of it. So we can actually customize markers even further. For starters, this is how we use a custom image for our markers. We create an image either by embedding this into our Swift, so it's deployed with our application, or by loading it at runtime through the icon loader class. You can use either method to construct your image, and then you pass it in as one of the marker options when you construct your marker. So the top example is embedding this image into your Swift, and the bottom example is loading this from a website. If you are going to load content into your Flash applications, you have to be aware of the cross-domain restrictions that Flash enforces. Here we have two different icons that we want to use in our API site. The left icon comes from a domain called site.y.com, and this domain does not provide us with any privileges to use its images. So we are allowed to load this into our application, but we cannot interact with it once we load it. So you can only display it. You can't read the values of the pixels, for example. And then from the second site called site.x.com, here we load an icon called storm.png. And this time, this site is providing a cross-domain.xml, which says that any domain is allowed to use its content. Now what this means is that when we render these on the map, the right-hand image there, because we have permissions to read the values inside the image, we're able to construct a shadow for this. So this looks very professional. But the icon on the left, we don't have privileges to read the values inside the image, and so all we can do is display it. Finally, an example, a way of customizing markers I haven't mentioned yet is to make your marker actually an embedded Flash object, a Swift. So here we have a very simple class which makes a little spinning icon. And so simply spins around. If we were to place our mouse over it, it spins faster. So now we're going to use that as the icon for a marker. So just as before, we make a marker options object, specify an icon, and now rather than being an image, this is actually a SWIFT, this custom SWIFT that we displayed. So now we're going to see a map where this is used as one of the icons. You can see it there. If I mouse over it, it spins faster. I can also pick it up and drag it around if I want to. So you can imagine using this to create some really, really interesting and flashy looking content for your site. Finally, I should mention about info windows. You can open info windows either on the map or on top of a marker. To open an info window at a particular position on the map, you call map.openInfoWindow and provide it the location as well as the options for what to display. The alternative is to open an info window at a marker. If you call marker.openInfoWindow, then it will determine the location from the marker. This is usually the way that you open info windows. Info windows are also very customizable. There are many possible options you can provide. You can specify the title and how it is formatted. You can use HTML or plain text there if you like. The content as well, you can specify HTML and plain text. You can also specify the fill style and stroke style for the info window. So for example, you can have a background image in your info window, you can have a color ramp and so on. And the stroke style describes how the boundary of that info window is drawn. For an info window, you can specify that it should have a close button or should not have a close button. You can give it a shadow or no shadow. You can also specify the dimensions of the info window, the width and the height, how much padding there should be around the content inside the info window, and the corner radius, how round the corner should be. And you can also customize the tail. So let's take a look at some examples that people have built using the Maps API for Flash. So this is a very simple example. It has position control. You can zoom in and zoom out, for example, and it has an overview map control as well. But what's really neat about this is this button in the middle, which makes the map spin around. And what's really weird is you can keep using the map even after it's been rotated and changed colour. So everything remains entirely functional. All of the controls can still be used. So this is something you cannot do in JavaScript. So even though this is something that maybe a silly example, a slightly trivial example, it shows you what you can do in Flash that you just can't do in JavaScript. Here we have an API site that one of our partners built. This is written by AF Components, who were one of our trusted testers fairly early on. What they've done is they have combined a video with a map. We'll see if that loads. While it loads, I'll start loading on the tab as well. Oh, okay. Excellent. So what this Swift does is it shows a trip of the world that one of the developers of this company took. So they started out in San Francisco and then travelled around the world taking videos at each place they went. You can see particularly there's a map here. You can interact with the map while the video is playing. The video is taking a little while to load, I'm sorry, but you can see that this is actually moving around its video. You can skip ahead if you want to look at a new location. Once that catches up, it will start to play. Okay, so here we have a map using the Maps API, some video using a Flash component, and a UI widget that this company has written to integrate the map with the video. Okay, so that's taking a little while to load. I might come back to it later. So this site is developed by 360cities.net. They provide panoramic images of various locations around the world. Here they've taken several panoramic images in Prague. So what they're doing is they're showing on a map here the various locations where they have panoramic imagery. You can switch between the panoramic scenes and the map will update accordingly. Unfortunately, the video is still loading, so it's taking a while. Let's try skipping to a new location and see what happens. Oh, still loading. Okay. So the final example is a game which a company developed. Ooh, crashed. Not a very good game, perhaps. Okay, so if there's more time after questions, I'll be happy to show you some examples. If you want to learn more about this API or any of our APIs, please visit code.google.com and you can find reference documentation, links to the various groups, the forums supporting the Maps API and other APIs, as well as tutorials and example applications. Okay, before we go to questions, I'll keep this slide up and then we'll go to questions. Please read this slide as well.
大家好，借这个机会，我们在这儿招募一些这个地图 API 的志愿者，招募10名。如果呢您在北京工作或者学习，您这个熟练 JavaScript， 并且对这个地图的 API， 在地图 API 的应用方面从事过一段时间的开发和应用，而且对这个网络上的社区工作有热情的话，欢迎加入我们。您可以和我们的工程师一起来维护这个 Google Group 上面关于 Map API 的这个论坛。你也可以每月来我们 Google 参加一次这个地图 API 的沙龙，跟这个 Google 的 Engineer 一起讨论，一起研究。如果你有兴趣的话，可以举手，我把这个登记的单子递到您那儿。OK， 谢谢。
Okay, questions, please.
大家有问题吗？
Just a question. You know, the Flash is support very limited with HTML. So when you make a info window, how to solve this problem?
That's right. So if you include HTML in windows, we all know using Flash's default support for HTML. If Flash has limited support for HTML, then the restricted HTML that you can show there.
Do you think the XML is another function to solve this?
Can you repeat the question?
那个就是用，可以翻译一下吗？就是 就是说这个Flash 对于 HTML 的支持特别少，所以就是说想做那些特别好的应用的话，不知道是怎么处理比较好，用 Flash 来处理的话。还有就是是不是现在是用 MXML 或者 XML 来处理的一些方式是更好的一个处理的方式。
第一个问题就是已经回答了，我现在就 translate 一下第二个问题，是吧 The second question is instead of using HTML, which has a lot of limitations with Flash, do we have other options like using XML?
We don't yet, but we'd be very interested to consider such feature requests. Maybe I should talk to you afterwards. Yeah, that'd be very good. Thank you.
我有两个问题，第一个问题是就是我想知道这个 Google 它那个地图的那个数据的获取是不是通过卫星？然后如果通过卫星的话，它的能不能就是和GPS 合作，来在使用地图定位的时候，能够精确的定位每一个比如说一辆车的位置，这个应用能不能应用起来？第二个问题是在Google地图的一些扩展方面，就是说，比如说它现在有这样一些功能，就比如说我现在要在里边加入气象的功能，就比如说我可以上面查询每一个我那个鼠标活到那个城市上，我可以看到它的气象。就是说对于这些扩展功能的支持，就是有没有一些提供的 API， 或者说就是用户他三方在输入一些数据之后，就能够显示出一些类似于气象的信息或者交通的信息出来。
Two questions. The first one is how does Google acquire the data? Is that from satellite? If yes, can we support GPS-like products, like locating a car, vehicles, etc.?
Okay, I'll answer the first question and then I'll get back to the second question. So we obtain our data for the most part from data providers, from third parties who sell us data. Sometimes they have restrictions on how we can use the data, and sometimes some governments restrict the ways we can use that data. So we comply with any local laws and also comply with the restrictions of the data provider. So we do have satellite imagery in much of the world, and we make that available in the Maps API for Flash. In many countries, you can display GPS data on top of the map. I understand in some countries you can't.
You mean it's limited by the government?
That's right. So some governments won't allow GPS data, or will only allow restricted GPS data.
I see. Thank you.
Second question is, does Google Maps API supports applications that can take third-party data and then develop applications like when you move your mouse onto a city marker, then we show in the info window, etc., like the weather in that city?
Yes, definitely. So many of the really popular Maps API sites are called mashups because they combine multiple APIs from different companies, maybe an API from Google, and then data from another company, and then maybe another API from someone else. And this is very good. We like this. We believe that the web is very powerful because it allows these mashups. And so definitely, if you have a site that has, for example, weather data for each city, you can display this on top of the maps using the Maps API.
Mm-hmm. You mean all this Maps API could be used by a third party, right?
Yes, the Maps API is designed to be used by anyone.
Are they free?
It is free, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Two small questions about the distribution and deployment problem. One is in the when you try to load your runtime library, you can optionally pass the version number to your API. So
because we developers do not know what change will happen in the next version. So some developers may try to stick on a certain version of the library, but as you Google gets a new library, you may deprecate old libraries. So I just want to know if you had any guarantee about your versions. For example, I use 1.4, and how long can I use that? How long should I update my applications? Is the first question. And the second one is, what about redistribute your libraries? Is it totally free in any licenses? For example, some open source license like GPL or what else? Thank you.
So, with regards to the first question, this slide explains approximately what's going on. If, for example, you build your application using one version of the suite, and then sometime later, Google pushes out a new version of the library implementation, this will be automatically used by your code. Now, if you want to, you can provide an extra parameter, which is the version. And so you can say, I want to use version 1.4. And if you provide this parameter, we will never swap out the implementation library. We'll always get exactly the same library. So this may be useful to you.
Do you have a guaranteed time period to support a certain version?
So, yes, let's say at least 1 year. So in general at Google, if there are many sites using a particular version, we will just never deprecate it. If something changes, we'll let developers know well in advance.
And the second one, is it free to redistribute your library?
So the implementation library is compiled and provided from maps.google.com. If you try to host it from another server, then it won't be able to talk to maps.google.com for the tiles and for geocoding. So you'll have difficulty if you try to proxy it and put it on another site. The code is not open source. It's something we will consider doing in the future, but we haven't done yet.
Does Google have any plan to port this API to Silverlight?
To port it to Silverlight. So Silverlight and Flash are different development environments, right? If Silverlight becomes incredibly successful, then perhaps we will consider launching an API for Silverlight, just as we have one for JavaScript and one for Flash. But we have no plans at this time.
还有问题吗？
What is the difference between KML and XML?
So KML is a form of...
And MXML, the three one.
Between KML and MXML, did you say?
XML, KML, and MXML.
So all of these are XML formats. XML is the extensible markup language, which is very, very generic. And then KML is a form of XML specifically for use in Google Earth. MXML is a form of XML specifically for use in the Flex software development kit.
So the KML is only used by the Google Earth.
KML is supported in Google Earth and in Google Maps. It is supported in the JavaScript Maps API, but we haven't yet added support for it in the Flash Maps API. We plan to do that soon.
Yes.
还有问题吗？没有问题的话，就刚才那个志愿者的这个表， 有没有人要填到这边来，或者是你手里面还有这个表格，请交到我们前面来好吗？那我们这个 talk 就到这儿结束了，然后一会儿以后还有下一个 talk。下一个 talk 是3点钟开始。